All right, welcome everyone. Happy to be with you guys today. I know it has been cold few days here in the Twin Cities, and if you're at home right now, hopefully this is a perfect opportunity for you to be bundled up, enjoying some warm tea. I know I've got my cup of tea here today and trying to stay warm and share some good information. This webinar is for you parents out there if you're looking to help your child with behavior issues, with mood issues, tantrums, meltdowns, especially if you've been stuck at home maybe these last few days instead of your normal routine of your child out to daycare or school. You might notice even more of these things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I am very excited to be with you guys because this is something that we're super passionate about in our office. My name is Dr. Tye Moe. If you don't know me, we own Whole Family Chiropractic here in St. Paul, and we work with a lot of kiddos with stressed out minds, and this is something that we really love to share with you guys. So I am going to bring up a PowerPoint here. So what we're going to talk about today is, let me jump start here. So we're going to go over a few things that have to do with these behavior type issues and really identifying something different probably than what you've been used to looking for, and rather than ways to handle the situation better. I know there's lots of strategies out there for that, and in fact my wife, she's a parent coach. She does wonderful at helping you calm the fire from the outside and handle situations better. But what we're going to talk about today is what is actually happening inside your child's body that might be contributing in the first place. And that's what we find is that there's times where parents see like, I know part of being kids is having these issues, but also I'm wondering about my child if there's more to it, right? And that's probably one of the biggest challenges and frustrations sometimes you face as a parent, is knowing, is it just the terrible twos? Is it just my kid being defiant? Or is there something more to it? So we know that as kids, their brains are different than ours. There are things where they go through growth spurts, not only in their brain but in their physical body, that can be affecting their moods and their behaviors. If you've ever followed when your child was an infant, there's something called Wonder Weeks we talk to a lot of our parents about, and that actually shows developmental time periods, like a week at a time or whatever it is, a few days, when your baby's brain is going through a lot of a growth spurt, and you know in that moment they're going to be tough to console. So part of being a kid is having these moments. We also know that kids' brains are a lot more in the emotional centers than we are as adults. As adults, we're able to use our logical brain way better. So kids often have bigger reactions simply because of this. If their Lego tower gets knocked over, their logical brain isn't there to say, I can rebuild it in a minute, but instead their emotional brain takes over, and it might be the end of the world. Or you're in the grocery store and you tell them they can't get a treat, and again that emotional brain might just be running the show and taking over and having this big meltdown, this big tantrum right in front of everyone. So the point is that there's always going to be some of these scenarios, but the question is, when does it become too much? And so I want you to think about, for your child, how does it compare to some of the other families that you hang out with? Some of the families that we see, they'll actually have one child who behaves pretty well and another child that is more this explosive behavior, grumpy, moody, even though they're in the same household. Or you might parent a certain way, whether it's conscious parenting or being more connected or being more disciplined. No matter what it is, there's going to be other parents out there doing the same techniques and maybe getting a different result. So again, it might not be the parenting, but it might be something more going on inside your child's body. So regardless of what the specific concern is it mood, is it behavior, is it meltdowns, is it grumpiness or moodiness, what we see common in these situations is your child's brain is basically kind of like bubbling up, and it overflows a lot easier than another child's brain. So if their cup is already filled with stress, like I said, maybe it is that Lego tower gets knocked over. Maybe they get told they can't do something, and because it's already filled to the top, that's just enough stress to tip them over and have a meltdown. versus the kids that are behaving well. A lot of times what we see, if the structure on the outside, if the environment is the same, is it's something inside their body that their glass, like this water glass here, is actually their stress level is so much lower internally that they can have a few things that start to make them mad, but it doesn't tip them over the edge and they can recover before melting down. So what I want to talk about here then are two different types of stresses. One is stress from the outside of the body, and then we're going to talk about stress from the inside of the body. And on the outside, there are some things here that if this has really been a struggle or really been a challenge for you, you might have already looked into. For example, chemical stress can be a good one. I know for myself, if I eat certain foods, if I have certain drinks or preservatives or additives, different things, I get in a grumpy mood. I'm not nearly as happy and as joyful as I can be with certain foods in my body. So that can be a super common one. Maybe it's certain dyes or additives. I know for my wife, she doesn't respond well to gluten. When she eats gluten, she actually gets a lot of like anxiety in her body and a lot of extra stress. There's emotional stress, which can come from a household. It can come from school, from teachers, from classmates. There is physical stress. This is one that we're going to talk a lot about today because this is one that I see where sometimes a past stress is still being stored in the body. We're going to talk about not only how that is, but why it can affect the neurology and what to do about it. It's something that we see super common in the kids in our office who have more extreme behavior issues. And then something that we definitely address in our office as well, and I just want to touch on here briefly, is the amount of technology that we have today is also very stressful for the brain. When cell phones are sending signals, when your laptop is communicating via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, those things actually go in and affect the brain's neurology and interfere with the brain, causing it to be more stressed. So the things from the outside can all affect the brain stress. And one big piece I want to mention here too, stress from the outside can, it's kind of a combination or potentially any one of those, but it's more on how others interact with your child, including yourself or their siblings. In all of our brains, we have these neurons called mirror neurons, which are meant to reflect what's going on around us. It's particularly how kids learn different things. They learn how to brush their teeth. In this case, these two kids are learning how to stick out their tongue. The point is it's meant to mimic and imitate what's on around us so kids can learn how to interact in the world. They can learn how to use a fork or tie their shoe or button their shirt. And the point with this one is this is another stress from the outside that is super important, because if a child is seeing another child not behave that well, or they're seeing stress on your face as a parent, it's going to impact their internal stress levels. So stress from the outside is a big piece of things, but what I find is that you see all these things and you start to know maybe what's going to set your child off. And you know that if a certain situation comes up, if a certain friend comes over, if they're told they can't do something, if they have to put their iPad away before dinner, and like you kind of dread this meltdown or this tantrum. And it becomes exhausting, especially frustrating when you can almost predict it's going to happen. And a lot of parents we find that they're kind of walking on eggshells and they're doing everything they can to like hold it together to not set their child off. And what we want to do then is say, well, if you have to work so hard on that external environment, what might be happening inside your child's body that's making you have to work so hard in the first place? So what I want to talk about next are two aspects of the brain. And when we look at the brain, there are parts of it that speed things up and parts of the brain that slow things down, both for the brain and the body. What this has to do with behaviors, tantrums, meltdowns, feeling grumpy or ornery, is there are part of the brain that speed things up also tend to create more anxiety and nervousness, versus the part of the brain that slows things down tends to be more calm and more grounded. Now, different stresses can trigger either this speed things up in the gas pedal or slow things down with the brake pedal. So I want to show a video here of, as I mentioned earlier, physical stresses. Now, physical stresses can be a one-time event, or what I want to show here is that they might be a significant enough event to cause this gas pedal and brake pedal combination to get thrown off in a long-term way. And I'll give some examples here after this. But what I want to do with this video is give you just a simple synopsis. You know, as a parent, when you watch these things, you see your child doing this, right? And this is actually from America's Funniest Home Videos. When you know what's happening into the child's brain, their neurology, their body, I mean, it's not necessarily funny. It's actually kind of heartbreaking. But the point is, when you watch this, whether it's outside, inside, with siblings, as a little kid, as a toddler, as an older kid, kids love to play, and these things can happen so easily. So we're going to hold off watching that for now. But the point is, as a parent, watch that for a moment and you can recognize, you can see those events in your child. So here's an example of what that can mean for your child's brain. This was a 2.5-year-old girl that came into our office, and what mom had noticed that her first year life, she was always in a really good mood. And she was happy and easy and content, and mom's like, oh, it's so easy to parent relative to her older sibling. And one day she fell from this bed and hit her head on the floor. And mom said she recovered on the outside, the bruise went away, the bump went away, but she was never the same with her mood. And she became grumpy and crabby and just moody on a regular basis. Now, we saw her at 2.5 years old, and there was a whole 1.5 years where that switch had been triggered. Now, I'm going to go into why that is here more in detail, and we're actually going to circle back to that girl's story specifically, but it's a really good example how one physical trauma can switch the stress for your child's brain. Now, other common things that we see in this category would be stress during the pregnancy. We've had a lot of twins in our office, and maybe one baby's stuck to one side, another to the other side. We have babies maybe stuck in a breech position, and they're not able to move around. We're going to talk about more why that is in a moment. Birth trauma, we're also going to cover here, but really a newborn baby is so vulnerable, and especially their neck. As you saw in a lot of those incidences there in the video that I just showed, if you notice, what was the common piece was the neck, right? One kid got hit in the face. When they fall down, they got this whiplash that so many of the kids were landing head first, and that can be one of the biggest traumas that starts to stress the brain out because of a certain aspect of neurology here that we're going to cover. So regardless, is these different issues can be happening and affecting something inside your child's body. So we mentioned on the one graphic there different stresses from the outside, but what I find with so many parents is the missing piece is often something actually on the inside of their body. And why that is based on these two modes of the brain, as I mentioned. So let's go deeper into this here. Now, the gas pedal part of the brain is also known as the fight or flight system, and it's activated when you're stressed out. I like to think of it as playing Metallica. For myself, I'm not a huge heavy metal fan, so when I hear raging heavy metal music, my brain gets stressed out. And guess what? I'm going to be a little shorter tempered. I'm not going to be as happy. I'm going to be a little more reactive, simply because that's what my brain, the amount of pressure, stress my brain is under. On the flip side, there is a brake pedal for the brain to start to slow things down. This is what happens when you fall asleep at night, or after a big Thanksgiving meal, or after a workout when you feel like so much calmer or more relaxed. It's because this brake pedal in your brain and your nervous system has been activated. Now, if you think of Kenny G or elevator music, or if you're at a really nice restaurant and you have gentle music in the background, all these things are very calming and soothing for the brain. So what happens is if the gas pedal's on, it's going to be like that picture we showed in the beginning of that cup that is easy to overflow. Because if the gas pedal's on, that internal stress in your child's body is so high, it doesn't take much to tip them over the edge. On the flip side is if your child is starting with a really low stress level, like an empty cup, and because that brake pedal has been able to work the way it's supposed to calm your child down, now a few things can happen and they have some reserve. They can build up and calm back down, and build up and calm back down, build up, calm back down, before blowing up and exploding over the edge all the time. So the point with this is that stress on the outside and stress on the inside can both cause this Metallica stress in your child's body. So how does this work then? Well, we know that our brain spends a ton of energy on keeping our body upright, whether we're sitting, standing, walking, and it actually spends 80 to 90% of its energy on this. As a result, movement is super, super important to charge your brain's battery. That's why when you go for a walk, when you get a workout in, and afterwards you settle down and you feel calmer, your head feels more clear, your thinking is more clear, it's because this movement has activated the brain for a state of calm and relaxation. Now specifically, probably the one fancy term we'll use today, if you haven't heard it before, is proprioception. Proprioception comes from all the joints and little muscles in the body. If you've ever had your child in OT, they might talk about proprioception quite a bit. It's maybe they'll squish your child under a beanbag or have them in a swing. When your baby was an infant, if you ever swaddled your baby and wrapped them up really tight, that's stimulating proprioception because it's squishing all those joints. It's also when you exercise, because you're moving all those joints and your body's pushing itself, hitting the ground, it's stimulating proprioception as well. So the point is, this input into the brain is the equivalent of Kenny G. It's calming, it's soothing. Disclaimer here, as long as you don't get driven nuts by Kenny G. But the point is, it's that calming music for your brain. Now, on the flip side of it, what happens is your brain at all times wants to be aware of your body. And that's why this proprioception is so calming for the brain, because it lets the brain know where the body's at. And when it gets a lot of it, it lets the brain really feel recharged and calm. So on the flip side of it, if you're not getting good proprioception, what happens is the brain starts to get antsy. It starts to feel on edge, and it starts to build that bucket of stress like we talked about before. So if this level of stress is building because you're not getting movement, now it's because that fight or flight is being activated, that stress in the nervous system and the neurology in the brain, all that stress is being activated. And here's the important thing. The reason this picture is on a teeter-totter is that it's just like driving your car. Either your foot's on the gas or your foot's on the brake, but not both at the same time. So if Metallica starts playing and your foot's on the gas, what that does is automatically drops the brake pedal. On the flip side, you start playing Kenny G, you start activating the brake pedal, and that gas pedal starts to drop. So internally, your brain is constantly doing this back and forth. Should I be more stressed? Should I be more calm? More stressed, more calm, back and forth. And what happens is if it's not getting that internal movement, it automatically shifts to more stress. So now you might be wondering, well, if this internal stress is happening, what does it have to do with chiropractic? Now, if you're watching this on your phone, this picture might be kind of small. If you're watching on the computer, you should be able to see it here. But it's a snapshot of the nervous system, how the brain sends messages through the spine out to all the parts of the body. And with this nervous system, there's messages from the body into the brain, like we've been talking about. And whether the brain's receiving gas pedal or brake pedal, it's got to do something. So the point is, what happens when we have one of these incidences, whether it's something you saw in that video, whether it's from birth, no matter what, it is affecting that alignment and shifting the communication between the brain and the body, specifically that gas pedal and that brake pedal into the brain. Hey Heidi, I see you're joining us here. No worries. We're still happy to have you, and this is being recorded, so you can always rewind and catch the earlier part that you did miss. But what we're talking about here is that internally, this calming part, that brake pedal, because it comes from all the little joints and your spine is made up of joints, it is 60% of this Kenny G, this calming effect for the brain. Specifically, 1/3 of it comes from the upper neck alone. Now what that means is that if one of these injuries we talked about before has impacted the spine, specifically the upper neck, like we talked about with so many injuries, or that little girl that I mentioned falling on her head, suddenly your brain is losing out on about 1/3 of its ability to hit the brake pedal, that Kenny G, that calm going into the brain. And what happens then is, because the brake pedal isn't being activated, it automatically shifts to the gas pedal, and the brain starts to become stressed and overwhelmed. Now, the piece that I want to dive in here a little bit more, because some parents we talk to say, you know what, my kid is not behaving well. They are throwing lots of tantrums, they're moody, they're grumpy, and I can't think of a specific incident that triggered it. And so I want to back up here and let you know that, yes, there are times where it's obvious, like we showed, but there's also times where you don't remember anything. Or you see your child, maybe they took a good tumble and you think, oh, they brushed it off, they're good to go afterwards. But if we back all the way up to the birth process, this can be one of the most significant times because of how vulnerable a newborn baby's spine is. And as I mentioned, that upper neck is 1/3 of the brake pedal for the brain, and that's the most vulnerable part during the birth process. So there's a couple doctors, Dr. Gutman and Dr. Biederman, medical doctors that were doing this research. They studied 1,000 babies, and they found that in the babies that they studied, 80% had something off from the birth process, even in a relatively normal birth. And what they realized is the impact that that has on the neurology and the immune system, as mentioned here, not just the neurology, but how the neurology impacts the immune system, that getting that corrected is one of the most impactful things they could do for kids. There was one baby that I checked after a home birth that went super smooth. Everything was normal. It went well. And even that baby, his C1 at the very top of the neck was off quite a bit. So I wanted to mention that because sometimes it's this piece that gets overlooked, and we've had moms who have been in labor for 40 hours, or they're pushing. The other day mom said she was pushing for 7 hours, and baby, instead of progressing with every push, baby's head was stuck in the pelvis, in the side. And what was happening then with every push, the head was just getting jammed into the pelvis, but baby's wasn't progressing through the birth canal. So that was a lot of stress on this super vulnerable area. That's the major brake pedal for the brain. As a result, she's dealt with all kinds of challenges with his mood and behavior and the level of anger that he has in his body. And it's because that trauma had shifted things so far off. That brake pedal was being stopped. Now it was just gas pedal, gas pedal, gas pedal, and his cup is always full. So someone looks at him wrong, and boom, it explodes over the edge. So let's go back to that 2.5-year-old girl that I mentioned before. Is what we found when we did her evaluation in our office is, sure enough, there was a big stress up top here. So what we do in our office to see if the if the brake pedal's working properly or if the gas pedal's stuck on, is we do different sets of scans. So this happens to be a thermal scan that's measuring for interference along key areas of the spine. And as you can see with that big red bar there, even if you've never looked at these scans before, we want to see white. If we see green, blue, or red, that's different levels of interference. So in this case, that red is severe interference, and it happens to be in the upper neck where there's a nerve called the vagus nerve. So those are probably the two more scientific terms we'll use today, is proprioception and the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is around the brainstem, and it's one of the biggest brake pedals for the brain. So what happened when she fell off her bed, she injured this area, and like I said, on the outside it looked like it healed. The bruise went away, everything like that, but inside it shifted her body. And it shifted her body in such a specific way that her brake pedal suddenly got shut down, so her gas pedal got stuck on. And that's why she became grumpy and moody. Once we started adjusting her, we removed this interference we do a neurological adjusting, so super safe, super gentle, no twisting, turning, popping, cracking. But the point is, once we started adjusting, we started making that shift. The brake pedal started being activated with each adjustment, and pretty soon the foot came off the gas pedal. And when the brake pedal was activated and the gas pedal came down, suddenly she became happier. She became nicer. She interacted better with her brother. Mom didn't have to walk around on eggshells anymore because she could see that calm happening in her daughter's eyes. Instead of it being up on edge, she started to have a much calmer baseline. Here's an example of another girl, 6 years old, when she came in, and a similar situation. Mom said, you know what? When she was younger, she was always really calm. But when she was 4, she fell and hit her head on cement. She got a concussion. And a few months later, she started daycare and became really agitated. Mom thought, oh, maybe it's the new daycare. But a couple years later, it was still persisting. So instead of that calm girl that she used to know, she just had this agitation, became angry more easily, and had a tough time regulating her emotions, and just got worked up easy because internally her body was so filled with this stress. So as you can see with her scan here, what was shifted out of place is affecting big chunks. Here again you see that red in the neck. There's another red area down low. But a similar story where that injury shifted her body and internally got that gas pedal stuck on. Brake pedal collapsed. And as a result, it doesn't matter how loving mom is, how nice to this girl her siblings are. It doesn't matter what she does because internally the stress is so high. So that is what we offer as an alternative to you as a parent needing to be so vigilant in every situation or working so hard to manage everything in the external environment. We want to look inside your child's body to see, hey, maybe that gas pedal's just jammed on. Maybe the brake pedal's shot. Regardless, if we can find that inside your body and start to make a shift, suddenly those stresses on the outside, like we talked about in the beginning, don't have to be as big of a deal. And it starts to make your job as a parent easier. So if you're interested with this, as we're coming to a close here today, we have a simple 3-step process in our office. So if what we've talked about resonates with you and you're sitting there wondering, I wonder if it was something during my pregnancy. Maybe it was that labor, that delivery. It didn't go quite as smooth as we wanted it to. Or maybe you're wondering, I had his friends the other day and mom said he took a good tumble. I didn't see it happen, but maybe that was still lingering. Maybe you're wondering, is this why my child takes so much energy to manage, to keep control of? If you're wondering that, that's what we want to help you find out. So our simple 3-step process is, number 1, make an appointment. What we do in that first visit is we discuss what's going on, we do our evaluation. So it's a combination of hands-on checks and then those scans that I showed you before to actually measure neurologically what's going on inside your child's body. The nice thing with the scans, nothing goes in the body, nothing's taken out of the body. So no blood draws, no x-rays, no radiation. Super safe, super gentle. We do them on newborn babies. We do them on pregnant women because of how safe they are. Once we have that information, we put it all together, and step 2, you get your results, and if we feel we can help, we put a plan together for you. The nice thing with this is you're going to know whether we can help or not, and then you have all the information, what it's going to take, how much it's going to cost, all the details to know if you want to move forward, and if not, there's no obligation to pursue care. If we can help and you're ready to get started, step 3 is start the process. And the cool thing is, like I said before, it's super gentle because it's neurological, so no twisting, turning, popping, cracking. And most of the families that we work with start to see results pretty quickly. Within a few weeks, they start to see those changes to know that their child's on the right track. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. We are definitely here for you because we see so many parents that are struggling and becoming frustrated, confused, exhausted, looking for answers and not knowing what to do to help. And it really is our passion because we love these types of kiddos and we love seeing the results that we get to have in our office and start to see the whole family dynamic change. So please reach out, give us a call, shoot us a message. We're happy to help you. We've got a great team that will take care of you guys and see if we can help, and if so, get you back on track. So reach out with any questions. Thanks for attending today. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the comments. We'll be monitoring this, keeping an eye on it, whether you're watching it live or recorded, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care, everyone.